License and registration, if you even know what that means." The officer's voice dripped with contempt. His sunglasses reflected nothing but the old man's calm face and the cracked dashboard of the 2003 Lincoln Town car. A little too clean, a little too dignified for the rundown part of town. "You deaf, Grandpa?" I said, "Get your damn hands on the wheel before I drag you out and teach you some manners." The man didn't flinch, didn't blink. His fingers rested gently at 10 and 2. "I'd appreciate it," the elderly voice said evenly, "if you lowered your tone. There are children nearby." "Oh, I see." The cop chuckled, stepping closer. "One of those types. Thinks respect is automatic just 'cause you've got gray hair and a church suit." He kicked the driver's side door. Hard dot across the street, a mother froze mid-step. A toddler dropped his juice box. Even the traffic lights seemed to pause between yellow and red. "You're stalling," the officer sneered. "Probably got something in the glove box, huh? Weed? Stolen wallet? What is it this time?" "I'd prefer not to be shouted at through tinted lenses," the man said quietly, "and I'd like a supervisor present." The cop ripped off his sunglasses. "Oh, now you're giving me orders?" He leaned down, face inches from the window. "You think wearing a tie and speaking soft makes you special? You look like you came from a nursing home, not a courtroom." The man turned, finally looking the officer full in the face. "I came from a courtroom this morning, actually." "Oh, I'm sure you did," the cop laughed. "Sweeping the floors, maybe? Filing cases for real lawyers? You're wearing that suit like you just found it in the alley." Silence. Then the man spoke. "Do you know how many courtrooms in this country still don't display a portrait of a black judge?" His voice was calm, measured, not angry but resolute. 57%. I've visited all of them." "What the hell are you babbling about?" "I was appointed in '95, served the circuit. Elevated in '06. Now I serve the Supreme." The officer blinked. What?" The old man reached slowly into his jacket slow enough to calm the tension in the air and pulled out a black leather badge wallet. He opened it just enough to show the gold emblem, the federal seal, and his nameplate underneath, Associate Justice Nathaniel W. Ford. For the first time, the officer stepped back. "Sir, He tried to fix his voice, but it cracked. "I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you said," the justice replied, locking eyes with him. "Every word. Every assumption. Every insult." It poured out so easily, I can only imagine how often it happens. I didn't recognize, because you weren't trying to." He let the silence hang there, heavy. A second officer arrived, drawn by the frozen crowd, and the tight knot of tension around the car. He stepped forward quickly, unsure whether to escalate or diffuse. The first officer turned to him in a panic. "Johnson, he's someone important." The second cop glanced at the badge, then at the man, then at the first officer's hand still resting on his holster. "Step back," the second officer said sharply. "Right now." Justice Ford calmly rolled up his window halfway and whispered through the glass. "You see a car you don't expect. You see a man you don't respect. And you think the badge on your chest gives you the right to speak without consequence." He paused. "But every once in a while, the man behind the wheel holds a higher court." And with that, the Lincoln glided forward, leaving behind a stunned officer, a widening crowd, and the slow, crashing sound of authority collapsing under its own ignorance. "Sit down." The voice was firm, dispassionate, but surgical. Captain Wallace didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The way her pen clicked once, then stopped, said everything. Officer Daniels sank into the chair, sweat gathering beneath his vest. The internal affairs room wasn't large, just 4 neutral walls, 1 glass of water, and a silence that hadn't blinked in 40 minutes. "So let me get this straight," Wallace said, flipping a page. You pulled over a Lincoln Town car. Minor tag issue, correct? Yes, ma'am. No weapons, no warrants, no aggressive behavior? Daniels hesitated. He didn't follow my instructions right away. He didn't immediately. Put his hands on the wheel, she clarified, not even glancing up. You then kicked the vehicle and accused him of drug possession? Daniels leaned forward. I didn't know who he was. You thought an elderly black man in a suit driving a 10-year-old Lincoln was a criminal. Say it out loud. Daniels' mouth opened. Then closed. Wallace pushed a photo forward. You know what this is? It was a courtroom, packed. In the front row, 5 men in robes. One face unmistakable, older now, but firm, wise, intense. That's Justice Nathaniel Ford, Supreme Court of the United States. The first one confirmed after the '96 Reform Act. You just called him a thug in front of 10 civilians and 2 ring cameras. I didn't mean to disrespect. You kicked his car. I didn't know. You didn't care. Daniel's chest rose and fell. His voice dropped. Is this going to EA? Wallace stared. It's already there. What I want to know is why him? Daniels blinked. What do you mean? You've pulled over 14 drivers this month. 12 were black. 9 were cited for vague non-compliance. 4 filed complaints for language. Daniels stiffened. I don't see color, ma'am. Wallace didn't smile. Good. Then you won't mind when the review board doesn't see your badge. She stood. The meeting was over. Elsewhere, courtroom hall B, 3rd floor, the morning was unusually quiet. Justice Ford walked through the corridor with his hands folded behind his back. His steps were soft, polished shoes against marble. Not rushed, not heavy. Just certain. Clerks avoided eye contact. A few whispered as he passed. One young attorney nodded, but with the kind of reverence that comes from shame, not admiration. Ford stopped at an open door. Inside was Judge Harriet Wells, Federal Bench, East Division. She stood when he knocked. Justice. Ford, she said, I was hoping you'd come. He stepped inside. Closed the door. I didn't come for apologies, Harriet. I didn't offer one, she said gently, but I heard what happened. His eyes scanned the book's lining. Her shelves. Then I hope you also heard how calm I stayed. She smiled faintly. I did. It shook half the department. He turned. Then why the meeting? I wanted to show you something. She picked up a file, opened it, laid it on the table between them. Inside, a letter, stamped, unread, dated. 3 years ago. Ford raised an eyebrow. Your nomination, she said softly, to Chief Justice. It never left committee. Ford stared at the paper. I never applied. I know. Someone else did. His brow furrowed. I think they buried it, she said. Not because you weren't qualified, but because they knew you were. Ford said nothing, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. I think this moment. Wells continued, this incident may have given you something that application never could. He looked up, a spotlight. Meanwhile, security office. Federal Courthouse Officer Daniel sat alone, watching body cam footage. Again and again. The words echoed. His own voice. License and registration, if you even know what that means. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. Outside the monitor room, whispers traveled faster than the footage could play. Something was shifting. Justice Ford had said nothing publicly, but the silence? It was loud. Wait, that was him? The law student's voice cracked mid-whisper as she stared at the paused video on her screen. The camera angle was shaky, filmed from across the street, but unmistakable. A cop shouting, a quiet voice. The flash of a gold badge. Another intern leaned in behind her. Zoom in. That's Justice Ford, right? She clicked the mouse. The shot sharpened barely. But the white hair, the calm posture, the slow rise from the driver's seat. Undeniable. I thought he retired. Nope, still serves. Never misses a Monday docket. They looked at each other. The air between them buzzed, then one of them opened Twitter. Posted by @LIONESS. 7:49 a.m. This happened outside our own courthouse. The man this cop insulted isn't just someone's grandfather. He's one of the most dignified legal minds in the country. Justice Ford doesn't need to shout. He never has. His silence carries more weight than a gavel, and today, the world should hear it. Attached. 23-second video clip. #JusticeFord. #RespectTheRobe. #Silent Power by 8:15 a.m. The post had 7,000 retweets. By 9:30. Cable news had picked it up. Meanwhile, Office of the Chief Clerk. Ma'am, we've got 5 interview requests, 3 op-eds, and 1 White House aide asking if Justice Ford would, quote, consider making a statement on equity in federal law enforcement. The clerk barely finished before a second assistant burst in. Ma'am, Ford's chambers just called. He's declined. Declined what? All of it. No interviews. No op-eds. No comment. Double quote silence. The chief clerk set her pen down. He's making a bigger statement by staying quiet. Exactly, the assistant said. But everyone's reacting louder because of it. Courthouse Cafe, 2nd floor. A young paralegal sat reading the paper version of the story headline already printed. Black Supreme Court Justice profiled by local officer. He didn't even raise his voice, she whispered. Across the table, a bailiff nodded. That's why it worked. Someone else leaned over. I heard Daniels hasn't shown his face all day. He's done. Not officially. Doesn't matter. It's over. Y'all acting like it's justice. Man had to be that important just to be treated decent. What about the rest of us? The table went quiet, but the word stuck. Justice. Ford's chambers. That afternoon he sat alone at the window, one hand resting on an old leather-bound book. His clerk entered quietly. Sir? Ford didn't turn. They're asking again. Every network. Even PBs. Still nothing. They're calling it the silence heard round the court. Ford turned slightly. That's nonsense. Yes, sir. They want sound bites. But law doesn't move in sound bites. It moves in rulings. In precedent. He finally looked up. Did you file the amicus brief on Walker v. Madison? The clerk blinked. Yes, sir. Filed this morning. Good. That's how we speak. A pause. Then, gently. Sir, with respect. They want you, not just your decisions. Ford stood. Walked to the bookshelf. Removed a photo. It showed him decades younger standing beside his father in front of the old diner that once refused them service. This isn't the first time someone raised their voice to silence mine, he said softly. But it might be the first time the world noticed. Evening news panel, national broadcast host. Should the officer be suspended? Guest 1. He should be fired. If he'll profile a Supreme Court justice, imagine how he treats someone without a title. Guest 2. Let's not rush to judgment. The officer didn't know who he was. Guest 1. And that's the problem. Host. The judge hasn't commented. Do we expect that to change? Guest 2. I doubt it. Ford's always been quiet. Guest 1. Maybe. But sometimes the quietest man sets off the loudest storm. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels' apartment, he sat in darkness. Phone on mute. Laptop screen filled with articles, memes, comments. Cop screams at a Supreme Court justice? The audacity? Justice Ford blinked slower than this man's career. How do you lose a shouting match with someone who never raised his voice? Daniels closed the screen, paced the room. looked in the mirror, and for the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man staring back. We don't suspend people over Twitter trends. Police Commissioner Griggs rubbed his temple with one hand while scrolling the headlines with the other. Across from him sat the mayor's legal advisor, her arms folded tight, phone buzzing with unread messages. "This isn't a trend," she snapped. "It's a symbol." A black federal judge profiled in front of children, cameras, and taxpayers. Griggs didn't look up. He didn't file a complaint. He doesn't have to. The public already has. He set the tablet down, then let the public rage. Daniels is on admin duty. "That's as far as I'll go until there's a lawsuit," she leaned in. "And what if Justice Ford never sues?" Griggs smirked. "Then I thank him for his silence." She stared at him. "You don't get it. That silence? It's a mirror. And right now, the whole damn city's looking at themselves. Courthouse, basement level, HR review room. Your actions." The internal auditor began, reading directly from the file, "demonstrated unprofessional behavior, verbal aggression, and a potential breach of federal respect protocols under the Judicial Integrity Act." Daniels sat stiff, lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. "I didn't know who he was," he said again. "That excuse doesn't hold when the treatment is wrong regardless of identity," the auditor said without blinking. "Would you speak to a white man in a suit that way?" Daniels didn't answer. Another official slid a paper forward. "Officer Daniels, do you recognize this?" A printed transcript of the video. Every insult, every pause, every word. He nodded. "We've referred this to the ethics board. If they open proceedings, you'll be suspended pending investigation." Daniels gripped the edge of the table. "This is political theater." "No," the auditor said. "This is accountability. You just didn't expect the camera to be pointing back." Meanwhile, courthouse hallway, small things started shifting. Ford's usual elevator ride now included quiet nods. The guards stood up straighter. Some whispered "Your Honor," like they were saying it for the first time. But in the judge's lounge, the tone was colder. "Whole system's bending over for a single incident," one older judge muttered to another. "Feels like overkill. You'd say the same if it were you?" The man didn't reply. Someone else chimed in. "They want Ford to lead the conversation, make a speech, start a movement. That's not his job." Another voice. "Maybe it never was, but maybe now it has to be." "Press office, governor's wing. We need a line," the aide said, pacing. "A statement?" "No, a stance. Everyone else is weighing in. Civil rights groups, congressional reps, even 3 Supreme. Court justices like the damn video. What about Ford?" Still silent. The aide looked up at the ceiling. "That man's silence has more power than our loudest speeches." "Well," the Comes director said, tapping the desk, "then we better start writing before he finally speaks." Late night, Justice Ford's chambers, the door creaked open. Harriet Wells entered without speaking. Ford didn't glance up. He was writing longhand. "You've heard," she said. "I've heard too much," he replied, "and seen more than enough." She sat across from him. "They're trying to box you in," she said gently. "Turn you into a symbol, a soundbite. They want a speech, a podium. I've never played to the crowd." "No," she said softly. "You've played to the Constitution. And now the crowd's listening to that." He set the pen down. "They're launching a review." "I know. They want me to press charges. Will you?" He looked up. "I don't have to. The system is already doing what it never did before, responding to its own reflection." A pause. "But I'll do something else." She leaned in. "What?" He handed her the letter he'd been writing. She read the first line. "To the young public defenders and clerks of this nation." Her eyes widened. "You're not writing to the court?" "No," he said quietly. I'm writing to everyone else had forgot. He still hasn't said a word on camera. Doesn't matter. He hasn't filed charges. Still doesn't matter. Then why is everyone acting like he's leading a revolution? The clerk tossed a manila folder on the desk. Inside. The letter. Typed, signed, scanned, and now viral. To the young public defenders and clerks of this nation, you will often be underestimated. Spoken to as if your presence is permission. Dismissed in rooms you've earned entry to. Let them underestimate you, but let your work roar louder than their assumptions. I will not address my recent experience directly, because this is not new, and I am not unique. I write to remind you. Silence can be strategic, but so can action. And the courtroom? It was never theirs to own. Signed, Justice Nathaniel W. Ford, released with permission to all public law schools and civic education programs. Within hours, law schools nationwide pinned to bulletin boards, printed in newsletters, projected on classroom walls. Students read it aloud like scripture. Professors rewrote syllabi mid-semester. One young student posted a selfie holding the letter. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He wrote. And now I want to become a judge too. Another post followed. They raised their voice. He raised the bar. Meanwhile, courtroom 8B, Wednesday afternoon case number 4472. State v. Levi Barnes, a young black man. First-time offender. Misdemeanor theft. Caught stealing asthma medication for his sister from a corner store. Normally, 6 months minimum. No plea offered. But today, Justice Ford presided. The courtroom was packed. Rumors had spread Ford was about to rule. The prosecutor made his case tight, rehearsed, emotionless. And then Ford spoke. I've reviewed the footage, he said calmly. I've reviewed the intent. And I've reviewed the options this system routinely chooses not to offer. Silence. He turned to the defendant. Levi Barnes, you stole to save someone. That does not make it legal, but it does make it understandable. The law is not here to crush people surviving without options. It's here to uphold both order and mercy. He leaned forward, voice low. You are sentenced to 40 hours of community service, and you will intern at the city's public health office starting Monday. Let them see your face. Let them remember why the system exists. Gasps. Even the court reporter paused, eyes wide. The bailiff blinked. Ford stood. Case closed. News clip. Local station. Justice Ford made a surprise ruling today that some are calling historic, a clear departure from standard sentencing. While the case involved a low-level charge, the symbolism couldn't be louder. He's not just handing down decisions. He's sending messages in every word. Meanwhile, Police Department HQ. Internal Affairs Division. A low murmur passed through the bullpen. Someone slid a memo onto the captain's desk. Effective immediately. All officers required to complete judicial sensitivity and constitutional conduct training. Module 1 features footage from the Justice Ford incident. The captain tossed his pen down. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't speak to the press. How the hell is he still winning? The officer outside the door answered quietly, because he doesn't need the mic. He is the message. Justice Ford's chambers. That evening his clerk stood at the door holding a thick stack of envelopes. From students. From parents. From young black boys who've never even stepped into a courtroom. Ford didn't take them. He was busy reading another letter, one addressed to him, handwritten on plain stationery. Dear Justice Ford, I saw the video. I didn't know someone like you existed in real life. My dad's in jail, but he always told me real judges just follow the rules. You didn't just follow the rules. You changed them. One day, I want to sit where you sit. And I'll never forget the look on that cop's face. Thank you for staying calm. And thank you for being loud without yelling. Jamil, age 14. Ford read the final line twice, then folded the letter, closed his eyes, and smiled not in pride, but in peace, because something had shifted, and this time it wouldn't be shifting. Back? He wants to see you. Ford paused mid-step. The bailiff stood firm outside Chamber 6C, eyes unsure. He requested the meeting personally. Officer Daniels? The bailiff nodded. Ford glanced at the hallway clock. 4:07 p.m. He adjusted his cuff. Bring him in, alone. Inside Chamber 6C, IT was quiet. No cameras, no press. Just one table, 2 chairs, and the thick hum of a ventilation unit too old to be silent. Officer Daniels entered, hat in hand. He looked different. Not just tired, stripped. As if the uniform no longer fit his soul, only his body. Ford remained seated, didn't stand, didn't speak. Daniels sat down slowly, eyes down. I didn't come to apologize. Ford raised an eyebrow, just slightly. I already did that. And you didn't respond. Ford folded his hands. And yet, here you are. Daniels swallowed. I needed to understand. Understand what? How you did it, Daniels said, voice low. How you sat there, calm, silent, while the whole world flipped upside down. Ford waited. Daniels kept going. I've had people yell back, curse, threaten lawsuits, but you didn't even flinch, like it didn't hurt. Ford leaned in slightly. It did hurt. Daniels froze. But pain, Ford said softly, doesn't have to scream to be real. Daniels looked away. You don't know what it's like. Growing up watching people take your job, your place, just because of quotas. Because the system keeps bending for politics. Ford chuckled, but it wasn't warm. Son, I grew up having to ask permission to enter buildings that now bear my name on plaques. Daniels looked back at him. You think I'm where I am because of handouts? I didn't say yes, you did, maybe not with words, but with the way you looked at me on that street, with how fast you raised your voice, with how little it took for you to assume. Daniels gripped the edges of the chair. I thought you were someone else. You wanted me to be someone else. Ford stood now, slow and deliberate. You needed me to be the criminal, the stereotype, the excuse. Because if I wasn't, then you had to question yourself. Daniels stayed seated. Ford walked to the window, looking out over the city. You know what power really is, officer. Daniels shook his head. It's not yelling. It's not even punishment. Real power is choosing when to say nothing and still making someone question everything. Daniels breathed in sharply. I'm being suspended, probably fired. My union won't fight this one. Ford turned. Then maybe, he said calmly. This is the first honest thing your badge has done. Daniels looked up, startled. But it doesn't mean your story ends. It just means your old one does. A long pause passed between them. Ford stepped closer. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Daniels braced himself. Ford's voice dropped. I see a man with the same uniform my cousin wore the day he died protecting a store from looters. I see the same badge a white officer threw in the trash after turning in his corrupt captain. And I see the same silence I wore for 30 years when people assumed I was lucky, not qualified. Daniels looked like he was about to cry, but DIDN single quotes T. Ford stepped back. I'm not going to ruin you. That's the world's job if you let it. But you walked in here today asking how I stayed calm? He leaned in again, because I've spent my entire life waiting for the moment someone like you would finally ask why they were so angry to begin with. Daniel stood slowly. He reached for the door. Pause. Then, without turning, he whispered, Thank you for not yelling. Ford closed his eyes. I didn't need to. The door clicked shut. Later that evening, Ford's home library. Harriet. Wells called. Well, he came, and Ford stared into the fireplace. I think he finally saw me. And what do you see? Ford whispered. Change. Slow, costly. But this time. It blinked first. They want you in D.C. Ford looked up from his desk, brows lifting just slightly. His clerk held the envelope with both hands. The seal was unmistakable. United States Supreme Court Chief Justice's office. They're asking you to speak, the clerk said. Not just to the bench, to the nation. Ford said nothing for a long time. Then, what changed? The footage. No, the clerk paused. It was the letter, sir. Meanwhile, Senate hearing, Judiciary Oversight Session. Senator Williams, who once voted against Ford's elevation, cleared her throat before the microphone. I watched that video 6 times, she said. Each time I expected outrage, fury, fire. Instead, I found restraint, wisdom, power without noise. She adjusted her glasses. For the first time in my career, I'm asking to design a resolution honoring a sitting judge for what he didn't say and what that silence inspired. The chamber shifted. A symbolic gesture? Maybe. But the cracks in resistance had begun to show. Social media, National Education Week clips of Ford's ruling in state. V. Barnes were now being shown in high school civics classes. A new hashtag trended for hours. Judged by character. Young students posted mock trials with lines from his rulings. 10-year-old boy from Detroit recreated the courtroom, seen on TikTok playing both himself and Ford. It got 3.2 million views. Elsewhere, inside Harriet Wells' chambers, she paced while reading an article headline aloud, The Judge Who Broke the System with Silence. Ford walked in just as she finished. You know that's not how it works, he said. I know, she replied. But perception shapes policy. He smirked. You sound like a lobbyist. I sound like a woman tired of watching dignity go unnoticed. She turned serious. They want to nominate you for Chief Justice again. He sat. The last time, they buried it. This time, the public might not let them. A pause. You could be the first. Another pause. Ford's voice was almost a whisper. I was never chasing first. I was chasing fair. TV interview. Former cop, now advocate officer Gerald Mathis, retired, white 62, once led a precinct accused of racial profiling. He looked directly into the camera. I watched that clip, he said, and I realized I've been the loud man too many times. He adjusted his collar. I wish someone like Justice Ford had pulled me aside 20 years ago. Back in the courthouse, first floor lobby, the bronze plaque at the building's entrance was changed. New wording. Approved unanimously. Justice is not defined by volume, but by vision, in honor of Justice Nathaniel W. Ford. A janitor paused to read it. A mother took a picture beside it with her son in a toy judge robe. A group of paralegals whispered finally. Inside the elevator, even the silence felt different. Justice Ford's home. Later that night, the invitation still sat on his desk. Behind it, a handwritten note from the Chief Justice. Your voice, quiet as it is, has shaken pillars louder than thunder. We would be honored if you'd lend that silence to our chamber in your own words. Ford stared at it. He didn't smile, didn't cry. He reached for a fresh sheet of paper. And began writing. Effective immediately, all federal law enforcement must complete the Ford module before field deployment. The announcement came not from a news anchor, but from the Department of Justice directly. At academies in 6 states, cadets sat in stiff rows as footage played, Ford sitting calmly, the officer yelling. The silence. Then came the line that now hung in academy halls. Pain doesn't have to scream to be real. The instructor paused the video. Remember that. The next time you assume someone's silence means permission. Meanwhile, top law school in the Midwest, a professor scrawled a new essay question on the chalkboard. If justice is blind, why do some voices still have to shout to be heard, while others can whisper and still shake nations? One student raised her hand. Is this about Ford? The professor smiled. This is Ford. Elsewhere, a public library in Georgia, a quiet reading circle met once a month. Seniors mostly, some retired teachers. A former librarian doubt this month they chose Ford's letter, the one to the young public defenders. A woman read it aloud with trembling hands. When she finished, no one clapped. No one spoke. They just nodded, then passed it around again. Inside a police station. Break room. Houston 2 officers sat eating in silence until one muttered, "You see that plaque they put up?" "At HQ?" His partner nodded. "The Ford quote?" "Yeah. I used to think quiet men were weak. Now I think they're just tired of explaining themselves." His partner took another bite. "Or maybe they just don't need to." TV Roundtable, National. Panel on Justice Reform. The host leaned in. Ford didn't ask for attention, so why is he the symbol? The civil rights attorney across from her answered simply, because this country is tired of shouting and not being heard. Ford showed U.S. something else dignity that doesn't beg for approval. She tapped the table, and for once the silence wasn't ignored. Back at the courthouse, clerk's office, a new batch of applicants had arrived. Law clerks, interns, even custodial assistants. One resume stood out. A 19-year-old with no Ivy League degree, but a handwritten note attached. "I used to think courtrooms were for people who looked a certain way, talked a certain way. Then I watched a man win the room with just a sentence. I want to help him write the next one." The clerk showed it to Ford. He read it twice, then nodded. "Bring them in." Downtown protest. Peaceful gathering, Ford's. Name unspoken, but everywhere no chants. No megaphones, just hundreds standing in silence. Each held a copy of the letter. Each wore a small pin. A simple black square with the initials NF etched in white. A reporter approached the organizer. "What does the pin mean?" The woman smiled. "It means no force, just Ford." Justice Ford's office, sunset hour, he stood watching the sky. Orange streaks fading into dusk. Harriet entered, holding a small velvet box. "They sent this." He turned. Inside, a medal. Not for service, not for tenure, but for judicial impact. On national morality. First of its kind. "You going to accept it?" she asked. Ford closed the box. "No," he said gently, "but I'll keep the box open." Later that night, young boy's bedroom. Jamil, age 14, the boy who wrote the letter weeks ago, sat at his desk, finishing homework. His father watched silently from the doorway. "What are you working on?" Jamil looked up. "An essay." "About what?" "Someone who changed things." The father nodded. "You writing about that judge again?" "No." The boy smiled. "I'm writing like him. We've received an ethics complaint." Harriet Wells stood in the doorway of Ford's chambers, her voice unusually flat. Ford didn't look up from his book. "Of course we have." She stepped inside. "They're alleging preferential treatment in the Barnes case." "Claims you had?" "Prior connection with the defendant's family." Ford finally met her eyes. "I didn't." "I know. They know too. So what is this?" He closed the book. A warning. National headlines that evening. Justice Ford under scrutiny for controversial sentencing. Did silence shield a bias? Ford's quiet power faces loud questions. Cable news panels lit up. One anchor smirked through the segment. "You don't get to be a hero without enemies." But maybe this judge's silence is hiding something after all. In the background, a political war room. 2 consultants sat reviewing polling data. "This guy's become untouchable. Then we touch him with doubt." Doesn't have to stick, just needs to stain. You think he'll respond? No, but the system might. They leaned over a whiteboard labeled, "Objective, shake the myth." Back at the courthouse, internal memo circulates, audit initiated on Justice Ford's rulings over past 10 years. Any patterns of leniency, particularly involving minority defendants, to be flagged. A clerk saw the memo. Whispers spread. You? Here they're reviewing every decision he's made? He's been here for decades. They're not reviewing. They're digging. Meanwhile, Ford's home library, he stood alone, reading a new letter, this one unsigned. Type. Angry. You fooled the world, but some of us know who you really are. You're not silent. You're calculating. And we're coming for your robe. He folded it slowly, placed it in a drawer filled with others. TV interview. Harriet Wells speaks out. For years, we begged for a symbol of integrity on the bench. Now that we have one, the system treats it like a virus. The host leaned in. Why the backlash? Because Ford didn't follow the script. He didn't cry on camera, didn't beg. He just kept doing his job better than anyone else. Justice Ford's chambers. The Confrontation, a senior judge, entered unannounced. He was older, pale, carved from the system's coldest wood. You've made things difficult, the man said, sitting without invitation. Ford raised an eyebrow. How so? The press, the reforms, the letter. You've made this place look outdated. It is outdated. The man smiled thinly. There's still time to step back. Let the next wave take over. Quietly, with grace. Ford leaned forward. I've been quiet my whole life. But grace doesn't mean stepping back. Sometimes it means holding the line longer than they want you to. The older man stood. I've survived longer than most by knowing when to exit. Ford nodded. Then you go. Social media, reaction to smear campaign. You don't investigate a man's entire life unless you're afraid of his next move. Ford didn't break the system. He just proved it never liked mirrors. Funny how calm makes people so nervous. One post went viral with a single sentence. They're digging into his past because they can't bury his legacy. Justice Ford's home. One final visitor. It was Danielle's. Plain clothes. No badge. Just a face aged from truth. I heard they're coming after you now, he said quietly. Ford nodded. Then I'm here, Danielle said, if you need someone to speak up. Ford looked him over. You speaking now? Yes. Then I've already won. The investigation is closed. Harriet stood in the doorway, arms folded, this time with a smile. No misconduct. No violations. No further action. Ford didn't react. Just quietly closed the file he'd been reviewing. No apology either, I assume? Of course not. But you were never waiting for one, were you? He stood. Double quotes. No. I was just waiting for the storm to lose interest. National news. Final. Headline. Justice Ford cleared of all allegations, praised for his poise amid scrutiny. Some outlets tried to downplay it. Others admitted they'd gone too far. But most simply moved on. The silence swallowed the noise. Just like it always had. 1 week later, high school auditorium. South Chicago. Ford walked onto the stage, not as a judge, but as a guest. No robe, just a gray suit, older than the curtains behind him. The students stood as he entered. No one told them to. They just did. He approached the podium, took a breath, then paused. No speech in hand. No teleprompter. Just him. And then, when I was your age, he began. I was taught to speak clearly, loudly, and with certainty, so they'd have to hear me. But what I learned eventually is that silence, deliberate silence, can echo louder than 1,000 raised voices. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by being the last one still standing. and sometimes the greatest. Resistance is dignity. The room froze. Then thundered. Outside the auditorium, students gather. One girl whispered, "That man could have ended that cop. He didn't." Her friend replied, "He didn't need to. He made him face himself." Back in the courthouse, Ford's retirement announcement typed. 1 page, no press conference. I've written enough opinions. Now I'd like to write invitations to fairness, to courage, to those who think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means strategy. At the bottom, a date. His final case. No ceremony. Just a docket entry. Final case, courtroom 6B minor case. Tenant dispute. Nothing flashy, but the courtroom was packed. Former students. Retired judges. One senator in the back row. Even Daniel sat near the exit. Ford ruled with grace. Firm. Sharp. Clear. Then stood. Nodded to the bailiff. Walked out. No applause. Just breathless. Quiet. Outside the courthouse. Bronze statue unveiled. No pose of authority. No gavel. No robe blowing in stone wind. Just Ford. Seated. Calm. Hands folded. Eyes looking ahead. Not above. At the base, 3 words. Dignity is power. TV special. Final words from Harriet Wells. He never needed to dominate a room, she said. He just needed to remain in it longer than the noise. The host asked, "What do you think Justice Ford's legacy will be?" She smiled. That. Silence can be a sword. Final scene, Jamil, age 15 now, first day in debate club. He stands at the front of the classroom. Classmates watching. The topic is race and justice. He adjusts his notes, then smiles. "I don't want to yell," he says. "I want to make them listen." Fade to black.